lot of these big VCs, et cetera, these big investors are using debt. They have access to capital that maybe we don't have. And so is that what you mean, like how it's rigged, or is it because they have heavier influence, I guess the Cantillon effect, they have they're closer to the money supply, or is it that most people just don't understand how the financial system worked, and so you made the point earlier, we're forced to play, and so if you're forced to play a game that you don't understand, is that what you mean by it being rigged?
Well, I would say it's rigged more in the former sense of the Cantillon effect. So all money in fiat, central bank-backed fiat monetary system is created through loans. So essentially, one way to measure how much privilege you have in this sort of economy is how much access do you have to loans, right? Like how much can you get into debt? And the weird thing is, the richer you are, generally, the more debt you're in, and the more leverage you have, and the more you're able to get very favorable terms. I was reading.
Is that a bad thing, though, Jimmy?
It is, because it's all newly created money, right? So if anytime you have more money coming into the economy, essentially you're stealing from everyone else. Now, the biggest culprit by far is the federal government, and you can tell by the budget. I think the latest numbers say that already this year we're about $2 trillion in the hole with respect to the federal deficit just created this year. But a lot of that money is like, where does it come from? It comes from the Federal Reserve. It's created out of thin air, and it goes on the balance sheet as part of the federal deficit and so on.
But does it matter where the debt comes from, right? So like Mises talks about two types of credit. You have commodity credit and circulation credit. So commodity credit comes out of my savings. So let's just say, for example, I grew 10 bushels of wheat. I sell 8 bushels of wheat. One of the bushels I'm going to give to you on credit.
Yeah.
So now that's increased your purchasing power, but it came from my my delayed gratification, if you will, right? Versus circulation credit is where money is just created. So there's a big difference in types of credit.
Yes, and that's exactly the difference between BlockFi and Unchained Capital, right? Unchained Capital, it's money that is actually there, and it is out of someone's savings, and there's an opportunity cost to that money, because the people lending that money out would otherwise have to have the opportunity elsewhere to go get it. Whereas the loans that we're talking about, the Cantillon effect, it has no opportunity cost. It's literally created out of nothing. So you are able to expand the money supply that way, and that's how you can kind of measure the leverage that these players have. And like, socially speaking, like why are Vanguard and BlackRock, why do they have so much influence over everything? Why are they able to give ESG and DEI mandates to companies? It's because they have enormous leverage. They have access to loans, and they can bankrupt any stock that they want.
They're using everybody's money against it, right? They've taken over the pension funds and weaponized people's money against them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you have access to the money, then you essentially have a lot of power. So most people don't have the access that like a BlackRock has to shadow banking and 100x leverage and things like that. Most people have very little. In fact, one of the few ways that most people have of tapping into the monetary spigot is through mortgages and student loans. And lo and behold, those are two of the places where prices have gone crazy, right? Like, you try to attend college or buy a house, they're completely unaffordable. And that's where you're going to feel that inflation the most, is where the loans come in. This is specifically the Cantillon effect in action, because these are the places where people are allowed to take out loans that come from nothing, and the prices of those tend to go up tremendously as a result.
Is it sort of like you said earlier, like we're forced to play the game whether we want to or not, and I hate that. I hate that. Like, I remember like a couple months ago, I was driving down my main street here in town, and I looked at all these shop owners, and I felt sorry for them, because I'm like, they have no idea what's about to happen to them. Most of them don't, right? And where the Fed creates all this money and creates this artificial boom, and then they suck the money out, and then they create this bust, and most people are caught off sides on this. And if they don't play the game, if they don't grow rapidly in this time of growth, they're going to fall behind. So their purchasing power will be lost if they don't grow. If they don't add new locations and buy new trucks and hire new people, they get left behind. So they're forced to play. But if they don't, right? But if they don't play, they get left behind. So it's sort of like, I think that's kind of what you're framing up. We're forced to play this game. So if that's the case, I mean, we all have access to the credit and the debt. And so if I need to grow my business, why do you think it's wrong for me to take on debt to add that new location, to get those trucks for my crews to go out there and work and things like that?
Well, it's hard to make a moral judgment on a lot of that stuff, but I would say that every time you dilute the monetary, purchasing power of somebody that is essentially an observing third party or whatever, I think it's wrong. And the thing is, it may be very good for you specifically. It's certainly good for the bank because they're able to collect interest. The trick of economics is figuring out, all right, what are all of the unseen effects? What's actually going on? It might have seemed great that you got PPP loans, for example, during the pandemic. But what were the unseen effects? Well, the business benefited, the government benefited, the people that were your customers benefited. Who lost? Well, the people that lost were the people that were holding the dollar. And we saw massive, massive inflation. And it's not necessarily people in the US that got hurt the most. It's people in the developing countries. It's people, the orphan in North Korea that's unable to buy rice because prices just doubled in the black market in North Korea. That's who it's hurting. So I would say yes.
Yeah, that's one benefit that we have in the United States, is that because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world, yes, inflation has been very bad here in the U.S., but it's much worse in other nations, like Jimmy's pointing out. And so we're shipping a lot of that pain overseas, which is why we're seeing so much pain happening. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons. It's a very, very complicated situation. But yeah, I don't know. I just think about but I think it really comes down to the type of credit, right? So back to that circulation versus commodity credit. And it's a very complicated situation. I think about it like because of the system we're in, and we're going to talk about how this system can get fixed, and I believe there's a much better version of the system that we have. But in the current system that we have, if a bunch of homes got built and they need landscaping, well, I want to expand my landscaping business. So I want to go provide value to them by doing their lawns. I need to go buy more trucks to get my people out there. I'll take on credit to get those trucks. But now all those auto workers at Ford that just got their pay raise are benefited because now there's more trucks that need to be built. Right. So it sort of does add into the economy, but it's all baked on wrong incentives, malinvestment and things like that. Right. So even though there is incremental gains, the probably cost benefit analysis of it is that in the long run, it probably does more harm than it does good. I guess is sort of the point that we want to make. And so I agree. It's sort of like what I hear Jeff Booth talk about all the time. It's like, it's hard to understand this new system when we're stuck in the existing system that we have today. And so we're kind of stuck playing a game based off of these rules that we see, but it could be much better and it could be much more prosperous for everybody in this new system.